Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today is our third episode, and we're going to be talking to a regarded analyst and member of the web analytics community, Julien Coquet. I'm recording this introduction from my hotel room in Milan. I recorded this episode several months ago with Julien back when I was still living in San Francisco. But my move away from the city put the podcast project in the back burner for a while. I'm really glad that I'm finally going to be able to release Julien's wisdom for everyone. Julien has a story that may surprise you. He has a training in linguistics and found his way into web analytics as part of a consulting project. Soon he grew to be a respected community member and inspiration for future generations of analysts. Today we'll hear Julien's story and the wisdom he has gained over his 2-decade career. While this entire conversation is very quote-worthy, I particularly like his advice about being diplomatic in the way that we share results with our organizations. Presenting data is not just about presenting the facts, but it's instead about positioning our findings to create a win-win situation for everyone involved. We all know that data is really just a collection of facts, but sometimes it's about how do we present these facts to yield the best results, and really, how do we use that to tell the best story? Be sure to listen along for Julien's sage wisdom throughout today's episode. But first, before we get started with Julien, I want to give a word from our sponsor. Do you want to learn how to advertise profitably on Google? Join me at PPC Course and learn how Google AdWords works. Go to ppccourse.net for more information. And while we're at it, if you want to support this podcast, please do leave a review in iTunes. If you leave a 5-star review, I might just read it on the air. Also, I'm happy to report that the podcast has been accepted by Stitcher, which is a podcast directory that you can use on your phone. So if you want to subscribe there, be sure to look at our show notes for more information on how to join. Now on to the main event. Let's talk to Julien Coquet and learn how a trained linguist became a thought leader in the web analytics community. You can view our show notes by going to jeffalytics.com/Julien, and that's spelled Julien. Today we're here with Julien Coquet, who's one of my dear friends located in France, and he is one of the best digital marketers that I know. And so I wanted to introduce you to Julien.
Hey, Jeff. Hi, everyone.
Thanks for coming on the show today, and thanks for volunteering your time. I think that it's really important to get to know you and what you're doing and to really get a perspective as to how does somebody rise through the ranks to becoming one of the premier digital analysts that I know. And so why don't you give me a little background as to how you got started and how you got here?
Some of you who may know me know that I'm not an analyst by training. I'm really a linguist by training, learning foreign languages and applying those to regular brick and mortar marketing and trading and exports and stuff like that. And then at some point I figured I have quite a few options when I was done with college, and one of those would be to become a translator or an actual English teacher, professor, or scholar, whatever. And then I figured I didn't have the patience for either of those. I could have become a technical writer or a translator, but I figured I'd gone crazy by the 13th, dose the manual that translates. So I figured I'd use my knowledge of languages to and apply that to computing, which was, remember that France only just got out of steam power a few years ago. So seriously, we back where I was in Grenoble in the Alps, we had a pretty tight relationship with CERN back in the day. So we had very early access to whatever was going to become the web as we know it today. So I had very early access to stuff like the very first web servers and server logs, and started to look at how information could be shared that way, and how it could be measured fast. And I'm done with my studies, and I eventually went into multimedia authoring as a master's degree, so let's call it that way, to get a formal diploma for what I was already able to do with a computer, as in creating web pages, creating websites, project management, that sort of things. And from there, I pretty much went directly into consulting. Got hired by a firm called Capgemini and went straight to work for HP, where I managed the metrics, they call it. It was called the metrics program for Europe. Really, Europe EMEA region, so that's Europe, Middle East, Africa, and that was a great experience to first of all to enable marketing teams with their very first web reports and what was in there, what were they supposed to be doing next. Actually, that was the tricky part, but let's just say that I had a very extensive experience with implementation and politics and how to push implementation and optimization campaigns.
So you were able to you were just sort of thrust into this world. Then you had some talent, some skills, but really the analyst part, they just said you're an analyst now. This is what you're going to be doing.
Pretty much, yes. I think back in the day there was there still is today, but back in the day even more so, there was a nice confusion between what Ivan Ash calls a report squirrel and an analyst, and that really hasn't changed much today. But back in the day, if you were able to generate reports that showed exactly what the business stakeholders wanted to see and what sort of a business question that answered, you were a living god. Even though today it seems like it's really trivial. I mean, it's like you're just able to you can export to Excel. Yeah, great. Does it show how many people purchased? Yay. It was really, really basic back in the day, and but it also showed very, very insightful behavior elements, like why was HP never able to sell online? Well, because the shipping costs were killing conversion funnels.
Yeah, so they gave you the opportunity.
So they're starting to identify breaking points in their business processes and their or at least in their intentions. It's not just a thing to just set up a bunch of forms and hope that your visitors go through them and eventually buy stuff, but it was a great way for them to see, okay, where do they stop? Why do they stop? Or why don't they go on and buy product XYZ, which was promoted on the homepage? And they're starting to ask questions like that. So it was great to start telling them, okay, great, you can do this, but only if you do this, this, and this, and here's the impact, and here's how you can do more business. But there was always a political dimension there that would stop things at some point.
Yeah. So basically, you were able to get into this one. They sort of thrust you into it, but it was aligned with some of your natural talents. But then when you got into it, you were exposed to this, and you said, "This is a big opportunity. There's all these things here. People will listen to what I have to say. People can understand what we're going about here, and we're giving answers where answers never were before." And so you were put into the position, but then once you got it, it seems like you were able to take it and run with it. Whereas many people might be exposed to analytics data.
Not so much.
No,
not so much. It's a good segue because again, I was never an HP employee, although many people thought I was. I was still an employee at my other firm, and when my mission was slowing down at HP, I started to tell Capgemini, hey, look, we're a consulting firm. We should be providing this type of services. I'm totally willing and ready to train an entire team of analysts or web specialists or internet consultants that are ready to do that sort of job. And at the time, there was no real drive from a business perspective because Capgemini was not really in the web arena. I mean, they had a bunch of web projects, but it was more about building an intranet or stuff like that. It was not really about building actual web platforms or like a B2B or B2C platforms. Yeah. So what I did is I eventually figured I could go my own way and open my own consulting shop because I'd be I'm pretty sure I was one of the very first players in Europe in that field. So I could have gone my own way and started my own practice, but at the same time I didn't feel comfortable starting a company myself. So what I did is I joined another company called OX2, which was one of the first, if not the first, I think, European agency to focus entirely on web analytics. That company eventually got acquired by LBI, and then I moved over to France to join Hub Sales, which was closer to home.
Okay.
And now I'm switching over from the consulting side into the vendor side, because I manage the product that is called HubScan. It's a quality assurance solution for tags and SEO and whatnot. But I'll stop my pitch here.
No, excellent. I think that it's great to understand that journey. And so the way that I'm understanding it is that you basically were put into a situation and realized that this is here. Analytics are here. Digital marketing's here. These companies are making money online. HP, other companies have websites, but they don't really understand how to get the most out of it. And so there's an opportunity to provide services around it. And this is similar to my journey as well. Like, I tried to get big companies to understand this is where we're going to be. But obviously, as we all probably know, big companies can't move that fast. It's really difficult for them to turn the wagon around and to suddenly embrace the internet if it's a very small percentage of revenue. That might have been, for a consulting firm, that might have been less than 10% of their revenue opportunity. Well, they don't really need to pay attention to that. But for a small business, or going on your own, or going into a small specialty shop, that can be 100% of your business. And so there's a different focus depending on the size of the company and a different need. And so sometimes the only way to really get noticed is to find an opportunity and then go out on your own because of that reason. Or if you don't go out on your own, to join a small firm or to join a company that specializes in a certain area. And that's right. One of the reasons why we see so much opportunity in this industry, is because even though you started doing this 10 plus years ago, you could still say the same story about a lot of companies today. It's even those big ships, those big companies still haven't fully adjusted to an online only paradigm. They're still really getting the hang of it and understanding how they can embrace it.
Sure, but that's also the reason why most of these learning experiences were on very tactical operations, not very large scale campaigns to begin with. That was the goal. That was to, like you said, to get things moving on a larger scale. But just to prove the value of what you were doing and to trigger the snowball effect, you'd have to have this successful experience. Saying, hey, here's how I made a quick win. And here's how you in the other division in the same company can do it too.
Yeah. So were you able to, would you say that you're able to grow up with the company, or at least grow as you go along? At first you start with reporting, and then as you start to arrive at conclusions, like, we need to really understand this aspect of the customer experience. Did the companies start to catch up with you, or was there still a resistance as you grew in your ability to analyze what's going on?
There is a, how should I put this? There's a disconnect. Well, there was a disconnect. There still is in some way between what you're supposed to report and whoever is asking the report is going to be how they are going to report upon that and which sort of actions they're going to take. So back in the day, you'd be reporting on page views and stuff like that, and visitors, and a number of forms that were filled, and but they. Whoever you'd be reporting to would not look any further because their plus ones had no idea of how to challenge this. How is this a good number? Okay, they had not gone to they hadn't even reached the KPI phase. Is how do I measure the performance of my business? How do I justify my job and my salary? These guys just wanted to have run numbers. I mean, we're still in very much in the hits era.
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
Kids, how idiots track success, right? So really a e-penis war that would not end. The services and suddenly would fight over who would get the most pages and say yes. So what? So you had a very successful campaign, and people came from TV ads and print ads, and but how many sales did we make from it? Were those profitable? I mean, is my cost of the campaign going to be a cost after all? I'm seeing marketers and younger marketers, coming out of schools and stuff now being more prepared to ask the right questions because their schools are preparing them to include digital aspects of marketing, of sales, of communication, but there's still a disconnect between measurement and optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it sounds like, people are understanding a little bit more about the things that are available, but is it really mature enough that they're asking, that they're asking the right questions? And does that go up through the organization? Because somebody who's a young graduate really may not get listened to by an executive even today, even if they speak the language. So do you have any experience bridging that gap and sort of educating within a company as to how it needs to go? Or was that important to you? Or was it so much resistance that it was hard to really prove that point?
There was a lot of resistance, but what I found is there are ways to, well, not giving away all my secrets, but no, seriously, it's it boils down to politics again. There's always ways to present your findings, with like concrete numbers that show, hey, if you only did this, you would, increase your revenue by so much, basic stuff like that. And if you're able to present it in a way that, makes your plus one shine, everyone's happy and you bring new ideas to the table and everyone's going to want to be like you. And, but if you try and double cross your plus one and say, hey, my boss's boss, here's what we could do. But if it doesn't come from your boss, then of course, he gets humiliated and you get fired.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was never a good idea. It's petty. It's sometimes humiliating, but politics always plays an important role in reporting to begin with, and then in optimization. And okay, so we got these results. What do we do now? And pushing like a new campaign, or sometimes reorganizing the company or the business unit because you need to make more progress. You'll hit a whole bunch of a whole lot of hurdles, from HR to IT to whatever. So again, there's still a huge political component to how you do analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, I think that one of the lessons that I had to learn over the years is being right is not the most important thing. Being right is actually not a great thing at all, because if you were right, congratulations, you're right, but you also alienated a lot of people in getting there. And so what I've started to say to people is, if you're the smartest person in the room, which I think a lot of digital marketers and analysts, just because of their quantitative ability, are often the smartest people in the room, you need to act dumb, because nobody wants to be one-upped, especially if somebody's higher than you on the food chain. They don't want to feel threatened. So it's all about making these ideas that might be yours, making those the ideas of other people. It's making ideas, it's the idea that wins, not necessarily you on a day-to-day basis. And if you can do that long enough and you can prove the results, then it will help you out in the long run. If people trust you, if you can develop the relationships, there's a lot to it, more than just being right in the short term. It's all about getting where you need to be in the end.
Oh yeah, definitely, and also keep in mind that you'll have a different relationship inside the company, whether you're an external consultant or if you're an employee.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that as well. Consultants, no matter how good your ideas are, you want to have it supported by somebody in the company, because they have the context and the insights as to the company's goals. Absolutely. So you had mentioned that it's interesting to think about how neither of us went to school for this, and schools are starting to embrace it a little bit. But how has your education has it helped you at all with this, with the people skills, with the ability to deal with situations, or is this all things that you picked up along the way?
I'm sure there are things that my years in school have taught me, but no, unfortunately, they haven't really had any major impact on what I've learned and how I've learned it. Well, definitely, me being a Frenchman and having a command of English was a huge asset. But to be fair, I had a pretty decent level in English before I actually even started college. So that that was only a refinement, so to speak. That it's not like I learned new stuff.
Yeah.
When I went to a master's degree to learn about multimedia project authoring and stuff, that was something I already knew. I mean, most of it. I mean, what I learned is a bit more of maybe structure in terms of like project management and like asset management, stuff like that, but not really something major. So I didn't learn anything about my job in school.
Yeah. Well, I think that's learning in itself. That's what
but that's just me.
Yeah, you can't really expect that you're going to be given every single answer in an educational setting. They're not going to give you everything, but what they do is they give you structure to the thoughts you might already have, and they help pique that curiosity. I had the same thing where I started writing code on my own. Well, the school helped me understand if my code was good or bad or some of the principles, but I needed to then go and have the practice. So I think school complements your real world practice and vice versa. To expect that the real world is going to make you a perfect in anything is expecting too much, and the other way around as well. So what sources did you turn to then if the school wasn't there? Was there books, like paper books that you could read? Was there online materials? What are some of the sources you used for inspiration? Was it just conversations with other practitioners?
You mean about analytics itself, or
about analytics, about any of these things that you've learned, just how you progress your career. I mean, you've had a very nice career progression, and you're in a great position now. What did you turn to learn and to get to this point?
Well, there's always Google, of course, but back in the day, that was still very, very, it was pretty weak. I mean, you didn't have that many no resources, and then I'd say around 2006, 2007, I mean, information was a lot more available, because before that I had to go through a lot of trial and error and code my own stuff and do a lot of debugging. And, I had to spend a couple nights with Excel, to the delight of my wife. Excel and PowerPoint are now tools I use every day, with a few functions and and a couple macros that I ended up developing from scratch that still help me today. So that's pretty useful. But no, let's just say that having access to communities like the what we call the Yahoo groups. If you're the a veteran, you know about the Web Analytics Yahoo groups by Eric Peterson. Other than that, there was of course, the DAA plays a great role. And then as we in Europe, we're not that many players, so it's a small ecosystem. So the collaboration was also very, very very tight. And then social networks started to appear, and they really made a difference. You could ask anything you wanted from Twitter or blogs, and ask Avinash or ask whoever, and those questions you could ask almost instantly, because we have no life. It's a known fact that us digital analysts, we have no life. So if we get a tweet at 2 a.m. we usually answer. There's a few resources out there who will reply instantly or the day after, and you'll be the first to repay the favor. Yeah. I think communities have formed very, very quickly, and they have it's a treasure trove for any beginner analyst or any aficionado who wants to get more experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've noticed a progression, just like you're talking about. For a long time, it was forums that you'd have to be part of, and you'd have to sort of join a community in that sense. And then blogs started taking off. I think I started, I was just thinking about the first web analytics book I read, and it was Web Analytics Demystified by Eric Peterson on an airplane. I remember that. And somebody's like, "Why are you trying to demystify web analytics?" And I was like, "I have no idea." But it's but it was a very technical thing at that point. And then eventually it started going to the hands of people who could market the technical ability. And so blogs started popping up. Avinash, you mentioned, Justin, a lot of these people, Justin Catroni, Avinash, Kaushik, those are blogs that jumped up and really provided the answers. So they were getting these problems, they were solving these problems, and then they started to write about what the answers were, and it became a lot more accessible to find solutions to your problems, to find code snippets that would help you get the answer you needed, to just get ideas going, to take that hallway conversation you might have at a conference about Google Analytics and put it in a form that anybody could find. And so just like you, I would search for articles and come across these same, handful of resources that would give us the answer. And that was really how I got ideas, how I would implement ideas, and how I was able to grow. And eventually for me, it was like, why don't I create my own blog and share some ideas for the next generation of people, the next level of people who are looking to have that same type of introduction. And so it was a graduation there. And then now I've noticed that a lot of the conversations are heading back into forums. So both, the Google Analytics group on Google Plus is top notch. There's a lot of really good conversations there, some private forums again, and then even Twitter and things like that. If you ask a question on Twitter and like you said, and a web analyst sees it, they will help you find that answer. So it's a very giving community, and it's a very accepting community if you're trying to get into it.
The one thing that I see about these communities is something that we all experience. If you are a very strong contributor to these forums, unless you're super motivated, then you start to lose interest because it's always the same people answering the same questions, and it's nice that we get some new blood every now and then, but they still ask the same questions. So I always try to remember that you were a newbie at some point, so be nice. But if you're I think if you're still lurking on forums, it's sometimes more to share than to actually learn. Sometimes you end up learning in the process, but it's when you get to a point where you master the discipline, it's I think you get more into the sharing mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then let's just say that learning new stuff becomes something more not superficial, but marginal, as when compared to the amount of sharing that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So were there any people who helped you along the way to get to this point? Is there any people that, like, personal relationships, either in person or online, and you don't have to necessarily name names, but how did people factor into this? Were there mentors or peers that you looked to?
Well, of course, I'm biased here because I translated books from both Avinash and Eric Peterson. So these two were definitely an influence. And then there's other players on the market who were either employers or colleagues or distant colleagues or esteemed partners, and these were always there to exchange ideas. There'd be a few to name, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, no, that's fine, no problem. Was there any advice that anybody gave you along the way that helped you get there? Is there any advice you'd give to somebody looking to either get into analytics or marketing?
I'd tell them to never stop being curious and never stop to learn, because that's what drives me. I mean, I get bored very quickly, so I need to have new stuff to look into, new clients and new perspectives and new context to look at. In our industry, that the saying "every client is unique" is true, and it's excuse me, it's really going to happen. With engagement you'll find some common experiences from a previous engagement, but there's always going to be something unique that you remember about that client, or that that particular constraint they had, or the ridiculous name of the campaign they were trying to pitch, and somehow they pulled it off. Little details like that, but details that make each engagement unique. and I think you should always keep looking for new stuff and new little quirky, unique things.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of look at as what we have, our experiences is our knowledge base. So if you ever go to a website and you need support, you go to this knowledge base and you can refer to it and you can get the answer. It might not give you the exact answer, but if you're 80% of the way there, then you can fill in the blanks. It's not starting over from scratch. And that's really what I think that the whole concept we're looking at here is building that knowledge base as much as possible. That's why I called my website Knowledge Land, in order to, here's my knowledge base that I'm sharing with the world. Borrow from it as you can and see if it can get you 80% of the way there. And then it's up to you to figure out how the rest of it works.
Sure, but at the same time, one of the things that I say is, a best practice is usually someone else's practice. So it worked for someone doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So it's great to get ideas and inspiration, but don't, necessarily hope to base your entire strategy on something you read on the internet. It's great to have a base for research and testing, but in the end, you're the one who's going to build your own strategy.
Yeah, and it's really good to hear that, and it's good to see that you've done the same thing. So you and I have different experiences. We have ended up in a pretty similar place, but also your language ability in linguistics and ability to speak multiple languages obviously helped you out and done you some good. The ability, the fact that you had the experience working with certain companies in certain areas. Yeah, everybody's experiences are different, and it's all really that culmination of the experiences that makes you who you are as a marketer and what makes you bring that unique perspective to the world. So I'm curious about, I'd say that you've built a pretty good personal brand with your ability to be out there. If you go to the Google Analytics community on Google Plus, or if you really are involved with analytics, Julien's a guy that you should know and a guy that you'll see. How important has that been for you in your career? Have you focused on that, or have you sort of just let it happen?
I kind of let it happen, and I have to admit, and I hate to do that, but call it humble brag or whatever. But I have quite a following. It's nice, but I'd rather again be seen as a contributor than as a guru or whatever.
Yeah, basically, you're building a brand just by providing good work, by bringing good perspective, and by making the community richer.
Not on purpose, right?
I think that's really how a lot of people go about doing this, unless you just become a tour de force or a personal brand in yourself. That's really the way to go about this, is to let it happen, to build a brand by doing good, by people trusting you, by people understanding, hey, if Julien produces something, it's good quality, it's the best that's out there. And that's the best way to build a brand, from what I found as well.
Well, sure.
What would you be doing now if this career just folded as an option? Where do you think you'd be? Would you be using your education? Would you be doing something else?
Well, I'd probably be a cook somewhere. And most of us know how to cook a little bit, even only to save our lives. But I really enjoy, stuff like cooking or discovering new ingredients and recipes. So very much like learning new tricks in analytics. So yeah, if I hadn't gone into IT or the web, or I'd probably have gone into something more cultural or culinary.
Nice. I like to dabble in that on the side as well. If you were to ask me, I'd probably go into photography. That's my thing right now.
But that you already do.
Yeah, that does change over time, and I get interested in things and do it. But really, the marketing piece sort of factors into everything. I always take a marketing approach to problems now and say, how would this be solved with marketing? And can marketing help get this thing where it is? How do you get noticed? How do you get these things there? And ultimately, could you turn that into a business, or does it remain a hobby? So one last question. Tell us about now. What's going on now? Do you have any side projects? Do you have any primary projects? What gets you excited for the future?
Let's see. So like I mentioned, I'm out of consulting. I'm taking a break from consulting because I figured after 15 years, it's nice to take a quick break. Although I'm not quite out of the woods yet, because I'm still involved in analytics. So like I said, right now my new venture is HubScan. So it's a quality assurance solution that checks for your digital marketing tags are fired with the right values. It's a short version, okay, not meant to be a pitch. But let's say that it's very exciting for me because I'm in a position where I can grow a product, a piece of software with all the experience I've had in the field being a consultant. So it's a great way to go forward. Again, being able to provide a solution that saves you time, something I wish I had 10 years ago when I was debugging implementations and debugging multiple websites at once. I'd have saved a lot more time and maybe done something a bit more not productive, but maybe a bit higher value.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the product. I've seen a demo of it. It's very impressive. I was blown away by it, and I think that you're making a good choice by going into that. And I like that it's backed by a consultant, somebody with the experience, and it was sort of developed with some of your best practices and the items that you need in mind. And that's really the value proposition, right? It's to save time, to focus on doing the more high value analytics as opposed to spending all of your time just worrying about tagging and worrying about some of these blocking and tackling things that we need to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at it, we're still using 20-year-old technology. I mean, JavaScript hasn't really changed since then. I mean, the way we send tags is they're still pixels with a bunch of parameters. But I think QA is very, very often overlooked when you deploy your marketing strategy, and it really needs to have more attention paid to it. And again, this doesn't mean this is the end of consulting for me. I might just take a break and go back. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, I think that I'm curious to see what the future leads to you, and you and I are friends on Facebook and everywhere else. So I'm going to be paying attention to what you're doing, and hopefully the listeners learned a little bit about you, Julien, and what you're doing, and are interested in learning more. And so, is there any place that you'd send them if they wanted to learn more information about what you're doing and just learn more about you?
It's not always easy to type out my last name, but if you look me up on Facebook and Google Plus and whatnot, you'll find me. I'm pretty easy to find. I have a blog on juliencoquet.com that has an English version that has a few posts whenever I have a time to write. And that contains, I like to think a few reference articles, like the very few articles on how to maybe apply Google Universal Analytics to hardware, for instance, or like other funny articles which were meant to be proof of concept, but as a result became very, very well referenced. And I still get questions daily on how do I track my dog using GPS and Google Analytics. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So I'll put links to these in the show notes on the website so people can see the options and see some of these websites that you're talking about. And then I noticed you failed to mention my favorite of your websites, the FYA Analytics blog.
That's right. That's the worst kept secret on the Twitter community.
Oh, so yeah.
It's meant to be a satiric, / snarky account, but
maybe I just revealed that you're the person behind it. We can cut that out.
You just did, yes.
Okay. Well, I will not put that in the podcast then.
Doesn't matter.
Well, thanks for your time today, Julien. It's been really insightful to learn a little bit more about you and to see where you started, see that journey, and where things are going in the future.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope that if you guys have any interest in what I do, if you had questions, don't hesitate to contact me via the Jeff's podcast page or through the links.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your time, and looking forward to seeing more about what you're doing. Thanks, Julien.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, there we have it, Julien's story. Make sure to check out HubScan and his other projects mentioned by Julien in our show notes. To view all of our show notes from today's podcast, visit Jeffalytics.com/Julien. There you can learn how to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or comment on something you found interesting. Thank you.